we managed actually to keep this wonderful, warm, not just convivial, but actually such a lot of real, not just family affection, but the being together was a great pleasure. I mean, really did not invite anyone for that evening, so those evenings. But a friend of mine, Gopal Gandhi, who actually did the first Hindi translation of A Suitable Boy, it was called Koi Achha Sa Ladka. In fact, the only Hindi translation. It's a very good title, Koi Achha Sa Ladka. He had invited some friends to his place in Delhi. One of them was R.K. Narayan, and he phoned me. He said, Vikram, can you come for dinner to meet R.K. Narayan? And I said, yes, of course. And then suddenly I realized it was going to be that. So I said, look, actually, Gopu, I can't come. And I really must regret it, but I've been the one who's been a bit of a policeman in this regard, and I can't now. So I must have gone back rather disconsolately into the room where my mother was sitting, and she said, what's the matter? So I said, no, nothing really important. But she got it out of me, and she said, no, I'll talk to Shantam and Aradhana, and we'll... So I, who had laid the strict rule down, was the only one who gained an exception from it. But that was to meet my hero, my hero, R.K. Narayan. I might never have met him otherwise, and I'm undyingly grateful, not only for my mother taking up the cudgels, but for the indulgence of my much sat upon brother and sister.
Vikram, one more question. You mentioned Gopal Gandhi and the translation. Last night we were talking about the translation.
Yes.
Your books have been translated in many languages, but Hindi is a language you are quite intimate with, you know very well. How was it? You tested out Gopal by sending him a few passages. How do you feel about the translation and Gopal's work?
Well, what happened actually was that I was at the Nehru Center, and Gopal Gandhi had a very distinguished career, eventually became our ambassador to, High Commissioner to Sri Lanka, and the Governor of Bengal, and so on. But at that time, he was the director of the Nehru Center in London, a cultural center for India in London. And I was having dinner with him and his wife Tara, and they both said, you should have this book translated in Hindi. And I said, Gopal, I don't have an Indian publisher yet. He said, yeah, that's true, of course. And I said, also, it really needs to be translated in a proper manner. And later, when I did get a Hindi publisher, they wanted to have the title Ek Suyogya Var. And I thought to myself, oh heavens. But the translation itself was done by Gopu, and I asked him to do it even before I found a Hindi translator. And he got to work, worked very hard, I think 2 or 3 hours every morning, despite the fact that he had a full-time job and so on. But what happened was, and the way he got drawn into it was, I said, Gopal, I mean, what kind of translation do you think it should be? He said, well, it should be a translation that's Urdu when you're translating from Saidabai Firozabadi's speech, or sort of Tate Hindi when you're translating from someone else's in English. And so I said, well, I'm going to give you 2 passages, and you can sort of do it for me so that I get an idea of what you mean. So I gave him the first chapter. You too will marry a girl I choose. Very light-hearted and an introductory chapter. And the other chapter I gave him was after a much beloved character dies, the cremation of her body. And it's a very difficult thing to write, and it's a very difficult thing to translate. And well, Gopu did it so humorously in the first part and so movingly in the second. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to look any further. You've condemned yourself. You've got to be the translator. And so he was. I can't resist mentioning something. There was a very good Hindi critic who said that when you read this translation, it's very strange. It's like one of those carpets that you can't tell which side is the right way up. I mean, as a writer, I don't know whether I should feel jealous, but I just felt delighted, and which writer wouldn't actually, and especially since many of those conversations I heard in my head in Hindi, and they went back, of course. Many of the poems by Ghalib or Mir or anyone else were, of course, written in Hindi or Urdu, or the poems from Gandhi's Ashram Rashnavali Ut Jag Musafir Bhor Bhai. I translated them. Rise traveler, the sky is light. Why do you sleep? It is not night. But, Ab rain kahan jo sovat hai. That's so much more wonderful. So really, it's great to know. And the title, Koi Achha Sa Ladka. Where in a suitable boy do you get that sa? Which you can say is almost the basic tonal note of the sargam.
No more questions, Vikram. Poetry?
Actually, out of a sense of democracy, since you're tired of this profile of mine and that one of his, should we swap? Because I can't see anyone there. I promise you, this really is Coke.
There might be a disconcerting headline tomorrow.
No. There can't be. Maybe I should hide it under your hat. Well, no, I promise you, in honor of one of our sponsors who are Coke, right? We were thinking of doing something very mischievous and getting Pepsi instead. But no, we decided Coke was the thing to have. Just pass my Pepsi. Do you want to taste it? I promise you. Okay, that's fine. Yes, I guess this is something to do with my combination of laziness and melancholy. It's called a villanelle. It's a very funny scheme, a rhyme scheme. A certain line keeps repeating itself. And there are only 2 rhymes in the whole thing. It's called can't. I find I simply can't get out of bed. I shiver and procrastinate and stare. I'll press the reset button in my head. I hate my work, but I'm in the red. I'd quit it all if I could live on air. I find I simply can't get out of bed. My joints have rusted and my brain is lead. I drank too much last night, but now I swear I'll press the reset button in my head. My love has gone. What do I have instead? Hot water bottle, God, and teddy bear. I find I simply can't get out of bed. The dreams I dreamt have filled my soul with dread. The world is mad, there's darkness everywhere. I'll press the reset button in my head. Who'll kiss my tears away or earn my bread? Who'll reach the clothes hung on that distant chair? I simply must get out of bed and press the reset button in my head.
Another one?
This is called In Touch. If you can do so, read these words at night. Lie down as if to sleep. Turn off the light. Now read me with your hands, as light as Braille. My words may fail you, but your touch won't fail. It will make true what now my heart can see. You, whom I don't know, are in touch with me. The cues of pain or grace are blind from birth, blind to the torque, blind to the tilt of earth. Read out your words in lieu of mine, and I, far now or dead, may ease them by and by. Caged. I lie awake at night, too tired to sleep, too fearful you should wake, too sad to weep. I hear you breathe. I do not touch your face. How do we live like this, caged in one space? We two have lost each other, you and I. Why could this not wait till our love could die? Poor, pointless relic, bent on staggering on, when courtesy and passion both have gone, and all our energy enhanced when paired, and happiness once multiplied when shared. Light seeps out from the blind. What will it bring, this day that could, but will not change a thing? The litanies that bleed the heart before it understands that it can bleed no more. The bitter tone that taints our every speech. The thoughts that we attribute each to each, as if we were not friends, but manacled foes. As if one sorrow were two private woes. What grew with time took time to disappear, but now we see that there is little here. We are ourselves. How much can we amend of our hard beings to appease a friend? We cannot lose our ways, and cannot choose to lose what then it would be peace to lose. May love be ground away like all the rest from those who are already dispossessed. Day and night. This was a day that came and went. I don't know how the day was spent. The sun rose up and reached its height, the sun went down, and it was night. Somehow the hours that passed between dispersed as if they'd never been, though I attended every one, till both the day and I were done. Sleepless, exhausted, and perplexed, not knowing what is coming next, I sense the stab of causeless fears, the tedium of pointless tears. Lonely, yet lacking will to find one who could ease my limbs and mind, I wait once more for faceless day to blind the peaceless night away.
Brilliant.
And finally, a four-line poem, Prayer for My Novel, and this is really heartfelt. Prayer for my novel. Whatever force outside me moves my hand and gives me strength to dream and understand, let me, by grace enlivened and by skill, enliven those who lived and those who will.
Vikram, I will take the liberty to request one poem, and there's a very small story I'd like to relate with this short one. I started reading Only You Sleep Tonight when kind of at that age when trying to impress girls, talk poetry, and there's this particular lady I was trying to kind of get in bed with, and she wouldn't. And there's this.
Do go on. I mean, seriously.
No, hang on.
This is not a question. This is a short story, and I wanted to end.
No. But there's this particular poem of yours which I sent to her as mine.
It would have been to send the girl over.
Called A Style of Loving.
A Style of Loving.
Which does attend to my problem, the poem.
Right.
But I would ask you to recite the poem not because of the story, but because that was the only poem of yours which I found difficult to recite. The first two lines I always found difficult to recite.
So you want technical advice, do you?
Yes. Do kind of...
Actually, now in this particular case, there's an index of first line, so I can find it in the collected poem. Yeah. Light now something...
Restricts
itself.
I could never say it well.
Yeah, I should tell you that actually the book I'm working on now is a book called The Rivered Earth. It's a collection of 4 libretti, and... it's part of what I'm trying to do to clear space. Anyway, it's I wrote these texts in order that they be sung or set to music and be sung. And I remember that Alec Roth, the composer who set these texts to music, kept saying to me, Vikram, you've got to change this phrase with green fronds curled. No singer can ever sing it. That I have heard, that things are not singable, but the things are not actually readable. So I did flub a few lines just now. That particular complaint I hadn't heard before. Light now restricts itself. I did that. 153. A Style of Loving. Now this is an interesting poem because it has rhyme but it doesn't have meter, and some of my poems have meter but no rhyme, and some have neither. So here's, but all of them have soul, right? Okay. A Style of Loving. Light now restricts its... I blame him. Seriously. I've never had a problem with this before. Do you know, I think collections...
Go on, Vikram.
Collections of poetry shouldn't just have indices of first lines. They should also have indices of last lines, because quite often you can't remember the first line of a poem, but you can remember the lone and level sands stretched far away. But you might not remember I met a traveler in an antique land, which is, I think there should be an index of last lines as well, right? So, anyway, yes, this is where you heard it first. a style of loving. Why don't I leave out the first line and come back to it at the very end? Light now restricts itself to the top half of trees. The angled sun slants honey-colored rays that lessen to the ground as we bike through the corridor of Palm Drive. We too have reached a safety the years can claim to have created, unconsummated, therefore unjaded, unsated. Picnic, movie, ice cream, talk, to clear my head, hot buttered rum, coffee for you, and so not to bed. And so we have set the question aside gently. Were we to become lovers, where would our best friends be? You do not wish, nor I, to risk again this savoured light for noon's high joy or pain.
Yeah, I'm going to now...
But let me ask you, I mean, since your intention was to get her into bed, I'm not sure that this isn't contrary to your purposes.
I was 16, Vikram.
Right. Fine.
Probably 16.
Okay,
yes.
well, all right.
I'm going to open... 1 second. But I'm going to be the first one to ask the question. What is hot buttered rum?
Oh, hot buttered rum. Now that I've moved on to Coke, which of course never goes with rum, hot buttered rum, well, it's sort of... it's something that I used to drink a lot of in California. I don't know quite what the ingredients are and how it's made, but certainly it does contain a bit of butter. It contains quite a lot of rum, and it doesn't contain Coke. It's got some other cinnamony kind of ingredients. I used to have it regularly, but I never actually... there's something enigmatic about it, right? So perhaps that's the best way of explaining... I really wouldn't know how to make it, but I know that that's what...
poets have.
That's what poets have, to set them off, to lubricate their lines, let's say. Yeah.
Yeah, you here.
But I think you need a mic, otherwise I have to repeat your question in my answer.
Is there somebody who would take a mic around?
Are there mics anywhere? Any roving
We need
mics?
quite a few of those.
We need a few... you've got one more. If you possibly could stand somewhere at the back, then that would...
Vikram, you want to take the questions? You just point out.
Maybe I'll take the questions.
No, I'm the back.
Yes, ask away.
Good evening.
You'd have to hold it up too.
You'd hold it for me?
Okay.
Good evening. I have a technical question.
Yes.
You said you need to have that urge to write. Many a times when we're writing poetry, the one thing that I feel is a really major problem for me is that the urge does not translate as easily into words. There are times when you have writer's block where you have something you definitely want to say, but the second you put your pen to the paper, it doesn't come. At moments like those, how do you go ahead? Because I've tried music, I've tried reading. There are times it just doesn't come. How do you go ahead with poetry?
Well, I can't always say that it does. I do have a similar difficulty. Sometimes, they say music that lies too deep for tears or something. I can't remember. There's a lovely phrase by Wordsworth. Anyway, where it's almost beyond words, and you really... I suppose in that case, I would just say, don't write. I mean, there's some things that can't be written about, and life is not all about writing. So I would try a bit, and then think to yourself, whether it's sorrow or joy or whatever it is that you really, or a particular incident that you want to describe, then accept that perhaps it can't be done. The other way of doing it is to put anything down, really. Anything. Just get it going. And then after that, you can revise at will. Right? And the third possibility is what actually Wordsworth suggested, which is leave it for a while. Don't let it congeal so much as let it sort of be preserved. And then later, I mean, he didn't write the poem Daffodils immediately. They came to him later from time to time. So you can store up the experience, and you'll find that many of the particular unnecessary ingredients have been sifted and sorted away, and what's left is a kind of clarity of experience which you can write about. These are just different devices. But if no poem comes out of it, but it's a wonderful or moving experience, well, no harm in just having the experience. Look, I'll tell you what, we'll only take one question from each person except for you, since you've had the courage to stand up at the beginning. No follow-up questions after this.
Another question that I have is that every time you're writing poetry, there's something to do with meter, rhyme, the tenor of the poem. Do you keep that in mind when you're writing initially, or do you let it come back to you later when you're editing? Because sometimes when you're writing and you have an editor going on inside your head, it's very difficult to just get it down on paper. So how do you go about it?
Well, normally I would say you've got to do some hard work. You've got to know your forms if you want to write in form. You've got to know the rhythm. If I'm writing an entire novel in Pushkin sonnets, I can't suddenly drift off into something else. Otherwise the reader will say, is there a particular reason for doing that? And they'd get distracted from the story in the cleverness of the writer. And that's the last thing you want. You want your writing to take the reader into a different world, not say, wow, what a writer he or she is. And so you really have to get your skill to the point where it isn't obtrusive. That's the first thing. The other thing as to whether you should have the editor going on in your head all the time, well, it's difficult to say. The editor will be more quiescent once you get your skills going. Or you can do what sometimes has been done even by very fine poets, like, say, Wilfred Owen, Anthem for Doomed Youth, What Passing Bells for Those Who Die as Cattle. The first version was written in blank verse without rhymes, and slowly he began rhyming it. Now, I wouldn't recommend that. I think the knife and fork should come together, but in certain wonderful cases, the knife came together, a knife came and the fork came later. No rules. Actually, that's the one thing, if you were to take anything back from this. Every writer forms his or her own rules. When, how, whether. Yeah. I'll try to be geographically democratic, so yes. And the mic, the lady in red over there. Actually, logistically, I should keep a sort of patter going while the mic. Oh, there are two down there. Okay, please ask.
When you start to write a work of fiction, you presumably have some idea of how it's going to develop, what the shape is going to be. Do you ever find that a character, as he begins to come alive as a character, takes over and develops in a direction different from what you had originally intended, and therefore impacts the plot differently? What do you do? Do you go with that? Or do you say to the character, no way, you have to be the character I'm writing?
Well, the short answer to that is I go with that. In other words, I'm a writer, not a dictator. And once the characters have, in effect, taken hold of either my imagination or their own space, then to some extent I'm recounting what I'm visualizing and auditorizing, if there's such a word. So sometimes I see a particular scenario, but as I get closer to the chapter, I find it's changed, either because the characters have changed or the circumstances have changed. And then the vision that seems most realistic has changed from the one that I had, so to speak, planned for them. And in order to carry credence even with myself, I have to go with the one that, in a sense, the characters in their own lives have chosen. I'm not writing magic realism or something. I'm writing so-called realistic novels. I'm not saying that the next one won't be in a completely different genre. But so far, I've let the characters have reasonably free rein. Now, a work of art is not a kind of a work of undisciplined, hey, you guys go and do what you like, and if it's 10,000 pages, fine. No, there is quite a lot of artistic control in certain ways, which are quite complicated to explain in brief, and I'm not sure, in fact, I understand quite what they are, or that I should try to. But certainly with regard to the basic impulsions of the character, say, whom Lata should marry, or whether she should marry at all, one finds those people who were ciphers when you began writing your book, these fugitive beings to whom you impute certain traits, but who actually don't live in their own right, have become almost more real than the people you see around you. So you have to go with them. I'll take a question from the back and then I'll take yours. Yes, the lady in the grey. Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, who's your favorite character out of all your literary works? Because somewhere I read that you really disliked Michael from Unequal Music, and he's one of my favorites. So why would that be? I mean, I'm absolutely in love with him, so.
You poor girl. Actually, may I just actually ask you a question? Why do you like Michael? You think he's darkly romantic and he feels deeply?
No. I think he's the most realistic character. I mean, I can hate him and love him, and he's
I see what you
real.
mean. Okay, fine, thanks. That's the only one of my novels that I've written in the first person. Michael Holmes is the second violinist in a string quartet in London. And I wrote it in the first person because there's going to be quite a lot of technical stuff about Western music in it. And I didn't want it to just sound like program notes. Whereas if I wrote it in the first person, then when Michael is sort of talking about music, it's just his enthusiasms. And so it takes on a different coloration. It isn't as if the author is preaching to the audience or informing the audience, heaven forbid. And, but Michael is a complex character and quite a difficult character. In some ways, very sensitive, in other ways, quite unseeing about his effect on other people, and therefore, well, pretty selfish. And he falls in love with when he was a student, with a pianist, and then 10 years later, by chance, after their separation, which was largely, in a sense, his panic which caused him to leave, he meets her again, in a very Hindi filmy circumstance. There are two buses cross on Oxford Street, and they're double-decker buses, and they see each other. Okay, enough of that. But by writing it in the first person, I found I had to inhabit Michael's skin. And I've never really inhabited anyone else's skin for 2 years. So perhaps my complaint against Michael is not just the fact that I think he's a bit of a pill, but also that I be less of myself, whoever myself is. So perhaps I'm being a bit unfair on him, but I have the right to be. No one else has had to write that book. I'd like a question, if possible, to be taken from the very far back over there. That gentleman who's holding up his hand by the pillar. We'll take two more questions. One is there. One is the lady here, and that one there. So I've gone over my quota and I can't do any more. And I have to read that poem, remember.
More of a request. Could
Sure.
you please read out All You Who Sleep Tonight?
Actually, I can virtually recite that. It's 8 lines long. Someone told me some time ago it was put on the wall of a mental hospital in the Bronx. And I actually felt very moved by that, because I thought, it's given some solace to someone. All you who sleep tonight, far from the ones you love, no hand to left or right, and emptiness above, know that you aren't alone. The whole world shares your tears, some for 2 nights or 1, and some for all their years. Well, I can't always recite my own poems because different drafts are sloshing around in my head. And readers can probably recite the poems better or even remember them better, because I keep thinking, did I leave this word in? And you know, it costs you a lot. Know that you're not alone, or know that you aren't alone. I toiled over that for... It was very difficult to decide. And you know, whether a poem rings true or lasts or moves people or not can depend upon something as simple as that. Know that you're not alone, or know that you aren't alone. It was maybe the openness. Know that you aren't alone. The whole world shares your tears.
Is there something a bit obsessive about aunt and...
No, I don't. Yes, possibly. I mean, well, certainly it's, that you aren't alone is a slightly more unusual choice of words, isn't it? And it's, are you making a pun about aunt and uncle? No, you aren't. Because I did write a book about my aunt and uncle, 2 lives. The lady in red, that question, and then, other than those who want to remain for The Frog and the Nightingale, we'll have to draw it to a close. Yes.
Well, Vikram, when it comes, do you believe in creative writing courses? Do you think the skills can be acquired?
I really don't think the skills, I mean, what do people do when they read? Partly they read for the skill of the author, but that's a very small part of it. They read for all kinds of different pleasures, you know, but the books that last are books which contain an aspect of, well, for lack of a better word, soul. And that is not something that can be taught. You can be encouraged to express yourself more, but quite often you find in creative writing courses the opposite things take place. You know, the technique, the plot, the introduction of the characters, the rhyming skills, whatever, that seems to take precedence. And that's, I suppose, to some extent a necessary part of the craft of learning. I should also say that I shouldn't bite the hand that once fed me, because I did teach in summer, but my financial resources were rather low, a creative writing course at Columbia. And then I also, when I was at Stanford, I was studying economics there, but for 1 year I got a scholarship to be in the creative writing course, and I was taught very well by Donald Davey, who was teaching poetry, and, you know, yeah. But I think one can't write by committee, and quite often what happens in creative writing classes is the whole class piles in and say, why do you do that and why do you explain that? It can be very valuable, but you need to have a fairly robust personality to get past and through and over that. So I don't want to condemn them out of hand, but I wouldn't say they're the answer necessarily. You then have to spend a lot of time by yourself. You have to be your own creative writing class. And very strict with yourself and very indulgent. And the final question, was it you, ma'am? Okay, yes. I must apologize. Really, there is no time, and I did promise the kids that I would read that poem, so that has to take precedence.
Good evening, Mr. Seth.
Good evening.
In your equal music, you had mentioned that...
I'm sorry, I can't hear you for some reason.
Fine. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
In an equal music, you had mentioned that art, music is enough to sustain life. That reminded me of Elizabeth Browning, Aurora Lee, where she says that art is heaven, but love is God, and that is what you need to sustain life. I would very much like to know your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Again, reverting to a question that was asked earlier, remember that when you write a first-person novel, it isn't necessarily the author who's speaking his or her own words. We have an equal music here?
Yes.
Yeah. The last paragraph, the one you refer to, goes like this. Michael is listening to Julia playing something, and I'm not giving the story away, and at the end, he says, I push through the crowded lobby into the rain. I walk a long while through the streets, the darkness of the park. Once more I stand by the Serpentine. The rain has washed my earlier tears away. Music, such music, is a sufficient gift. Why ask for happiness? Why hope not to grieve? It is enough, it is to be blessed enough to live from day to day and to hear such music. Not too much, or the soul could not sustain it from time to time. But this is Michael speaking, remember. And the author does have an afterword, author's note, where he says, music to me is dearer even than speech. When I realized that I would be writing about it, I was gripped with anxiety. Only slowly did I reconcile myself to the thought of it. And seriously, when I was writing about music, I was afraid that I might lose my love for music by making it too work a day and too humdrum. Luckily, that didn't happen. My training was in Indian classical music, in Khayal. Pandit Amarnath ji, who was a shagird of Ustad Amir Khan Sahib. So, but I was afraid that I'd either lose, when I was writing A Suitable Boy with Indian classical musicians in it, there was that dread that the more you write about it, the less you get pleasure in sharing your tanpura and doing riyaz. And that did happen to some extent. But luckily, that time has passed. I haven't written about music for a long time. I've only written libretti which are going to be set to music. But I did not say that music and art is enough to live by. No, I mean, if you're hungry, then forget about music and art. children are starving, music and art all have their place. But what I said is that Michael, in the Western world, who can assume certain comforts, is just thinking that even if happiness of the conventional type might not come his way, why should you demand of life? It's not a birthright to be happy. And music is a great solace and a great giver of insight. On that non-wordy point, I'll end.